Hello and welcome to this episode of Business Basics. My name is Lee Iben. I'm the head coach here at ActionCOACH Campus. And today, my special guest, Ben Snyder with Project Gemini. And ironically, I love this, Ben and I are both coaches in the business space. And Ben, you've been at this now since 2015, I believe. Is that correct?
That sounds about right.
Okay. Well, welcome. First of all, glad to have you here. And tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, and why you decided to get into this business executive coaching space.
That is such an excellent question. And I can answer that from a couple of different standpoints. So I do have a natural knack for being very perceptive in reading those subtle signs and a very good people person, and all those cliches. But I do have a master's degree in organizational transformation and leadership from the University of Dubuque, which helped give me some meat behind my natural talents to see those things. But, working for companies, I've been working 40 hours a week since the age of 15. And
right.
So I'm ahead of the curve. I'm 37 now. So, you could add a few years onto that, I suppose. But
yep.
I've seen organizations that I've worked for, or been involved with as a volunteer in boards and different things that, it really matters for leadership and culture so strongly, for the better or for the worse. And I've seen the power how leadership and organizational culture are really the umbrella and the drivers for everything else in different organizations. And so I'm really empathetic, and I enjoy helping people. And I also know that comes with helping the mission of an organization is tied in with helping people and helping the community. So that's really what drives me.
Well, and as you and I were talking before, with the number of businesses in our area, 75% at least need some assistance on some level with business coaching or executive coaching or team coaching, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you have found a specific need, a niche, kind of in that team space. Can you talk more about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my primary focus is leadership and organizational culture. And culture is a buzzword. We all talk about it, but a lot of us, it's really hard to define it, even though we know it's important. So that's where my forte is and my home is. And so basically you could describe it from different ways of how people perceive, create, and behave in the workplace. I believe it was Jack Welch, or at least it was attributed to him, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so there's all sorts of different things out there, but it's really about behavior and aligning that behavior with who you are in the workplace. To use the Simon Sinek adage, I really focus on the why of an organization to understand how it works and what they do, and understanding your why has to align with what you're actually doing in the workplace. So that's where I start.
That's so true, Ben. That is so true. I share that Simon Sinek video all the time with clients and other folks I speak with, because as a business owner, they really have to understand the why. It comes right from your heart. Let's talk about those. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, we're such a culture that's driven on the now and these immediate needs that we forget the long-term, and we forget those questions that seem philosophical and unimportant that actually are drivers for success. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're exactly right, because it's once you can identify that why, your USP will stem from that. Once that, but they've got to figure out that why. What drove them into that position to begin with, whether or not they own the company or decided to work for somebody else. Why did you do that? Right?
Exactly. Yeah, and there's so much data out there. I'm sure you've seen it too, where yes, pay and benefits are important. But if people feel like they don't have work for a meaningful organization, or feel that individual sense of purpose, or the ability to make an impact, that's what people want. And that drives the bottom line metrics, from revenue to retention. I've even seen some data that people take 10 times less sick days when they are in a better organization. But that's all tied into leadership.
It is. And to your point, what we have noticed, my wife and I owned a business for 20 years. And when an employee said they were leaving because of money, it was never because of the money.
Correct.
You're not going to jump ship for an extra 50 cents an hour or an extra $1 an hour. There is something much deeper going on there. And they haven't either haven't identified their why, or we as a business owner haven't done a good enough job explaining our why.
Correct. Correct. And I think it is a mutual thing there, but organizations, it starts with that leadership in the organization that make that accessible for people to be able to invest themselves and buy in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the team dynamics. I use DISC. I'm a certified DISC practitioner, and I'm sure you either use the same system or something similar to that. But when we talk about behavioral communication among team members, expand on that for me a little bit.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different ways you could go. I could talk about just communication specifically, but I'll start with your use of DISC. Great
Yeah.
tool. I love it. There's fantastic tools out there that use the same framework, but just from a different perspective. So the Denison culture model, for example,
Mm-hmm.
takes that DISC mindset and then translates that into the organization and very pragmatic day-to-day perspective. You could do the same thing from I believe it's the organizational culture assessment instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite as a easier name to say as the Denison culture model, but it's a great tool where that tool really looks at the identity and characteristics of an organization, of who they are now, and
Right.
measuring out to who they're telling you they want to be. And so you can kind of get that 10,000 level foot view from identity, use the Denison culture model for the organization on a day-to-day, and then use DISC, to really get down to the personal level of an individual. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I did a year-long leadership study for an organization in which I worked with their middle managers who were on the partner track. And I use this tool. I don't think this tool is as valid as DISC, but I used it more for just a thought exercise, where there's the personality color index of 4 different colors, and DISC has its 4 quadrants, and all these other
Right.
tools
Right.
I mentioned have their 4 quadrants. But I gave them this and I said, well, take this home and look at each color of, say, blue, green, red, yellow,
Right.
and how they communicate or how they perceive the world. And think about these and which you might be, and tend to rank them. And then when we come back for the next session, we'll sit down and we'll talk about that, and then see if other people might think have a different perception of what color you might be. And what that turned into was they basically wanted to put a color outside their door or rank the colors of their office doors to say who they were, as a reminder to other people. This is how I view the world. And when you go talk to somebody else, they do that different worldview or different operations. So
Yep.
um,
Yep.
and that ties right into the same framework of an organization. And then you can use it for onboarding and say, we have a lot of these personality types, if we use DISC or these different strengths from Strengths Finders, how do they align with our organization? Where are we heavy? And are we getting to a point where we have too many people of the same mind or perception? And we need to bring in some people that can act as a devil's advocate to make sure that we're still on our toes too.
Exactly. And you touched on it. It's the way that we teach our team members to effectively communicate with other team members who may not, in the simplest term, be like us, right?
Correct.
And we have to be able to speak so they hear us. And I love that analogy. It's like, if you go to Germany, you certainly can't expect the entire village to learn English. It'd be easier for you to learn how to speak their language. And that's exactly what we're trying to do when we talk about team dynamics.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you could expand upon that and say, well, in Germany, they make the Volkswagen, and here we make Fords. They're both vehicles. They both have the same intent and function, but they're both very, very different vehicles for different purposes, made by different mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a car company where they don't have a good answer to that question of understanding who they are, that company is going to have trouble and not exist, or lose money, or lose people, or a whole host of innovation issues. And it's funny, we've owned all sorts of vehicles over our lifetime, my wife and I, and we've had a Volkswagen and now we have a Ford. And the Volkswagen is a car that is indestructible. It lasts forever, very well engineered. But
Right.
the creature comforts inside the car may not quite be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and they build them for efficiency and for roadworthiness, and so their seats are a little firmer than Americans are maybe used to, right?
Yes, you could say a little firmer. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, Ben. So tell me now, COVID-19 hit us back in the early part of the year. How did that impact the businesses you were coaching? How did that impact you as a coach?
Yeah, that is such an interesting question. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that these things that have been subtle in the back of people's minds is really starting to come out. People
Hmm.
are thinking about, making their lives more meaningful and doing those things. So they have those questions, and there's a lot of questions that I've seen in the past about confidence in the workplace. Do I have the confidence to do this job, and all those different things. And I think 2020 brought that out, and exposed it. And so that's been, I don't want to say good for business, because you don't want to see those issues. You want to make sure that people are as whole as possible.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think it's really good for us to be focusing on that question and get to where we're already on the way to going, but just accelerate that and make it more comprehensive. So it's been really good for business. I think I was actually ahead of the curve, because right in March I started doing all of these virtual book reviews, where I would talk about
Hmm.
a different leadership book or a different culture book for a half hour, and then have discussion on that and questions about the book. Now, what's interesting is that didn't take off right away, because I think I was almost too soon and too fast on it.
Uh-huh.
So that actually lagged at first. So if you want to talk about confidence, early on, I was like, "Ooh, is this a good approach? Am I making this work?"
Right.
And all of those different types of things. There's that whole acronym of MAYA, Maya, of most advanced yet acceptable. And I was maybe too advanced at the moment, where that hadn't quite caught on with the collective consciousness, I guess you could say. So
Hmm.
it's been good. It's been good for, I think, the long term vision of where we're going as a local community in the corridor, but as a country too, and for people as individuals. But it's taken some adjustment here and there. But I think it's a perfect time to have those conversations and start really having people be interested in that topic.
Completely agree. And that is my favorite word of the year, by the way, is impactful. Uh, if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it has taught us and given us the opportunity really to re-examine what we're all about, and what truly is most important to us. And then how can we be most impactful throughout our day?
Yes, 100%. You see organizations out there, or even people, and I probably do it myself sometimes, where you see something that's successful and you try and emulate it, but emulation isn't authentic. And so I think this is the year where impact is tied in with authenticity and doing something organically, because what's the point of doing an empty exercise just to beat somebody else at an empty exercise?
Right. Exactly. So Ben, let me ask you this: a parting question here for you. You've been in your own business now for 5 years, and I always ask this of everybody: what's your golden nugget of business advice that you would pass on to somebody else?
That is a fantastic question, and I always want to answer 10,000 different ways. But
Don't
to
we
be
all?
concise with that, I would really say, when it comes down to it, is that Simon Sinek question of understanding who you are,
Hmm.
understanding that it's okay to be authentically yourself. We're all human. We're all going to make mistakes, but that's great, because that's how we learn, and that's how we grow. So I would really say start with the Simon Sinek aspect, and go from there. But it's a really simple concept but a hard concept for us to do,
Right.
to feel that it's okay to be vulnerable,
I,
and it's okay to be you.
yes.
And I think once we answer that question and we're comfortable with that, the sky is the limit.
I completely agree. Well, Ben, thank you very much. Hey, don't go away. Hey, before we do leave, though, you have a new name. It's Project Gemini. So
Yes.
what's the best way for people to find you?
People can find me on Facebook or my website, which is projectgemini.biz.
Okay, perfect.
And there's
Well,
a
thank
really
you for
great story behind that name.
I got time. Tell us what the
Oh,
story
well,
is.
yeah, sure, yeah.
Sure, go.
So there's a partner of mine, and she and I were both born in May, we discovered, as we were thinking of a business name. So we were
Yes.
talking about Gemini, but the Gemini really plays into the aspect that you have these two, say, perceptions or different sides of the same coin.
Hmm.
So that we think we're really good at understanding the logic and strategy and the hard metrics of, assessing and understanding but also empathy and humanizing and telling the narrative and trying to have a balance in that way. So a little bit of pathos and a little bit of logos.
Love it. As a Gemini myself, I really appreciate that story. So thank you for that.
Well, we'll celebrate together in a few months here.
Yes, we will. That's my favorite month of the year. I love the month of May. So, well, Ben, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Likewise, I thank you for inviting me.
Well, sure. So my special guest today, Ben Snyder with Project Gemini. Look him up online. Check him out at projectgemini.biz, B-I-Z, and or reach out to him through LinkedIn and Facebook as well. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.